I expected pride at my graduation dinner, but instead, I watched my father hand the waiter a cash tip larger than the total sum they had spent on me in 22 years. Then came the words they spoke when they thought I was gone. They did not know I was listening, or that within 72 hours, the whole city would watch them sign their own destruction while believing they had won. My name is Nora Whitman, and for 22 years, I have been a background character in the meticulously curated reality show that is my parents' lives. I stood there in the humidity of a Savannah evening, clutching a diploma that certified I was now a distinguished graduate in data analytics. But to Graham and Celeste Whitman, I was merely holding a receipt that proved they had successfully manufactured a daughter who looked good on paper, even if they had no idea who she was in person. The venue for the dinner was the Grey, a converted Greyhound bus station that had been transformed into one of the most expensive and impossible-to-book restaurants in Georgia. It was exactly the kind of place my parents loved. It was loud, it was exclusive, and the lighting was flattering enough to hide the cosmetic work my mother had done in February and the stress lines my father was deepening with every scotch he drank. We were a party of 8. My parents, Graham and Celeste, sat at the head of the table like monarchs holding court. My father, a litigator who treated every conversation like a cross-examination he was winning, wore a suit that cost more than my entire 4-year tuition at the state university. My mother, a high-end real estate broker who sold historic mansions to tech millionaires from the West Coast, was draped in silk that shimmered like oil on water. The other 4 guests were the Ashfords and the Beauchamps, couples who were useful to my parents' respective careers. And then there was me. I sat in the middle, squeezed between Mrs. Ashford's oversized handbag and the edge of the table. I was wearing a simple navy dress I had bought off a clearance rack 3 years ago. It was the nicest thing I owned. I had spent the last 4 years living in a studio apartment the size of a walk-in closet, eating instant noodles and working the graveyard shift at a campus library to pay for the things my scholarship did not cover. My parents did not know this. To them, I was simply low maintenance. They preferred it that way. For the first hour, the conversation did not touch on my degree, my honors, or the job offers I was quietly fielding from firms in Atlanta and Charlotte. Instead, it revolved around the holy trinity of Savannah high society: real estate, lawsuits, and the failures of people who were not at the table. "The market is absolutely savage right now," my mother said, gesturing with a fork that held a piece of foie gras. "I listed the property on Jones Street on Tuesday. By Thursday, I had 3 cash offers, all over asking price. People are desperate to buy into the history of this city." "Cash is king," Mr. Beauchamp agreed, nodding solemnly. "Graham, tell them about the settlement you forced last week, the one with the medical supply company." My father took a sip of his wine, swirling the red liquid in the glass. He loved this moment, the pause before the brag. "It wasn't much of a fight," he said, feigning humility. "They knew they were exposed. I just had to remind them how expensive a public trial would be. We settled for 7 figures. It keeps the lights on." The table erupted in polite, wealthy laughter. I took a sip of water. My throat felt dry. I wanted to tell them that I had graduated summa cum laude. I wanted to tell them that my final project on predictive algorithms for financial risk had been published in an academic journal, but the air at the table was too thick with their egos to let any of my accomplishments breathe. "Nora," Mrs. Ashford said suddenly, turning to me as if she had just realized I was there, "you must be so relieved to be done with school. What is it you studied again? Communications?" "Data analytics," I said. "It is essentially using statistical analysis to predict future trends and solve—" "Computers," my mother interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "She is very good with computers. We are hoping she can help Graham organize his digital files before she finds a husband." The table laughed again. My father chuckled, patting my hand without looking at me. "She has always been the quiet one, a little worker bee. We are very proud." He did not sound proud. He sounded like a man who was satisfied that his car had passed inspection. The main course came and went. I pushed food around my plate, my appetite vanishing under the weight of my own invisibility. I kept waiting for the moment where they would ask me what I wanted. Just one question. Are you happy? Nora? Are you scared? What is your dream? But the questions never came. They were too busy discussing the upcoming gala at the museum and whether the mayor would be indicted before or after Christmas. Then came the dessert. The waiter, a young man who looked to be about my age, perhaps a student working his way through grad school, brought out a large platter containing a chocolate tart with "Congrats, Nora" written on the rim in raspberry coulis. "Oh, hold on!" my mother shrieked, her voice pitching up an octave. She fumbled for her phone. "Don't touch it yet. The lighting is perfect." She stood up, leaning over the table, instructing me to smile. "Look happy. Nora, shoulders back. Graham, lean in. Everyone, raise a glass." I froze my face into the smile I had perfected over 2 decades. The smile that said, "I am fine. I am grateful. I am the perfect daughter." My mother snapped 5 or 6 photos in rapid succession, immediately. She sat back down and began editing. I knew exactly what was happening. Within 2 minutes, the photo would be on her social media feed with a caption about how blessed they were to celebrate their brilliant daughter, accompanied by hashtags about family values and legacy. It was a performance. I was the prop. The tart was the set dressing. "Okay, posted," she announced, satisfaction radiating from her like heat. "That will get good engagement. The sweet family moments always do." She did not eat the tart. She was on a diet. My father ate 1 bite and pushed it away. The waiter returned to clear the table and bring the check. The bill arrived in a black leather folder. My father snatched it up before Mr. Ashford could even feign a reach for it. "Absolutely not," my father said, booming. "This is my treat. My daughter only graduates once." He opened the folder. I watched his eyes scan the total. It must have been substantial. 8 people at the Gray, with 3 bottles of vintage wine and appetizers, would easily run over $1,200. My father did not flinch. He pulled out his wallet, a sleek, alligator skin piece, and removed a money clip. He began peeling off $100 bills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He placed $500 in cash on top of the credit card receipt. The waiter, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward to collect the folder. My father made a show of leaving the folder open so the cash was visible to everyone at the table. "You did a great job tonight, son," my father said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Service was impeccable. You deserve it." The waiter's eyes widened. He stammered a thank you, clearly overwhelmed. $500 was a rent payment for some people. It was a lifeline. I stared at the money. $500. My mind, trained to analyze data and find patterns, instantly pulled up a spreadsheet of memories I had tried to delete. When I was 16, I needed a laptop for school. My father told me money was tight that quarter because they were renovating the pool house. I spent my junior and senior years of high school using a library computer that crashed if you opened more than 3 tabs. When I was 18, I got into a prestigious private university, but they offered no aid. My parents told me they could not justify the expense when the state school was perfectly adequate. I went to the state school. When I was 20, I needed emergency dental work because a wisdom tooth was impacting a nerve. My mother told me to put some ice on it and wait until our insurance deductible reset in January. I waited 4 months in agony. And here was my father, dropping $500 on a table for a 2-hour dinner service, simply because he wanted to look like a king in front of the Ashfords. "You are too generous, Graham," Mrs. Ashford cooed. "If you have it, you share it," my father said, leaning back and unbuttoning his suit jacket. "That is the Whitman way." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, structural failure of a bridge that had been carrying too much weight for too long. "I need to use the restroom," I said softly. "Hurry back," my mother said, not looking up from her phone. "I want to get a group shot by the entrance before the valet brings the car." I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but I walked steadily toward the back of the restaurant. I passed the kitchen, past the smiling waiter who was clutching the leather folder like a holy text, and turned down the hallway toward the restrooms. But I didn't go in. I stopped at the water fountain near the alcove that separated the dining room from the restrooms. I needed to breathe. I leaned my head against the cool plaster of the wall. I closed my eyes, trying to regulate my heart rate. Just get through the night. I told myself, just get through the picture. Then you can go home to your studio and never ask them for anything ever again. Voices drifted from the dining area. The acoustics in the old building were strange. Sound traveled along the curved ceilings in unexpected ways. I realized I was standing directly behind a decorative partition that separated the hallway from our table. I was no more than 6 feet away from the back of my father's chair. They thought I was gone. They thought I was out of earshot. "She turned out all right, considering," I heard Mr. Beauchamp say. "Quiet girl." "She is manageable," my father's voice replied. The tone was different now. The performative warmth was gone, replaced by the cold, transactional baritone he used with junior associates. "She is not a firecracker, but we don't need a firecracker." "Does she have plans?" Mrs. Ashford asked. "Is she moving back home?" "She will do what we suggest," my mother said. Her voice was sharp, precise. "We have the papers drawn up for the Davenport house. We need a signature to move the title into the trust. Having a young professional owner looks better for the tax break than having it under the holding company." "Is she going to read it?" Mr. Beauchamp asked, chuckling. My father laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound that hit me harder than a slap. "Nora? No, she won't read it. She is grateful for the scraps. Besides," he paused, and I could hear the sound of him pouring more wine. "The girl just needs the degree for the family portfolio. She is a resume patter for the Whitman name. Nothing more." The world stopped. The hum of the restaurant, the clinking of glasses, the jazz music playing softly over the speakers, it all fell away. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. A resume patter. Grateful for the scraps. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear, but from a sudden, violent clarity. I thought about the tip. $500. He tipped a stranger $500 to buy the admiration of his friends, while he planned to use my name, my identity, and my legal signature to secure a tax break on a property I knew nothing about. They did not see a daughter. They saw a shell company with a pulse. I took a deep breath. The shaking stopped. A cold calm settled over me, identical to the feeling I got when I finally cracked a complex code after days of errors. The variable had been identified. The pattern was clear. I did not go to the restroom. I turned around and walked toward the exit. I did not go back to the table. I did not go to say goodbye. I walked past the host stand, past the valet who was waiting for the ticket I did not have, and out into the humid Savannah night. I walked 3 blocks to where my beat-up Honda Civic was parked in a public garage because I couldn't afford the valet fees. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there in the dark. Back inside the restaurant, there was an empty chair next to Mrs. Ashford's oversized handbag. They would be waiting for me. My mother would be checking her watch, annoyed that I was ruining the timeline for the group photo. My father would be looking at the empty seat, wondering why his asset was malfunctioning. Let them wait. I started the engine. The air conditioning rattled, blowing warm air for a minute before cooling down. I pulled out of the garage and turned onto the street, driving away from the restaurant, away from the $50 steaks and the $500 tips. I left a void at their table, a silence that would soon turn into confusion, and then into anger. But as I merged onto the highway, heading back to my tiny apartment, I knew one thing for certain. The Nora Whitman they thought they knew, the quiet, grateful girl who would sign whatever they put in front of her, had just left the building, and she was never coming back. The air outside the restaurant was heavy with the humid warmth that blanketed Savannah in late May. I had walked out with my head high, leaving the silence at the table behind me, but as soon as the heavy glass doors of the gray swung shut, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a trembling fatigue. I did not go to the valet stand. My parents and their friends would be waiting there for their luxury sedans to be brought around, polished and climate-controlled. I had parked my 10-year-old Honda in the self-park concrete structure a block away, hidden from the street and the prying eyes of the society crowd. I reached the garage and took the stairs to the second level. The structure was dimly lit, smelling of gasoline, old rubber, and damp concrete. My footsteps echoed against the low ceiling. I had my keys in my hand, the metal biting into my palm. I just wanted to get inside the car, lock the doors, and disappear. I was 3 cars away from my spot when I heard the voices. They were distinct, carrying easily in the cavernous acoustic space of the garage. I stopped mid-stride. My instinct was to run, to sprint to my car and speed away, but something about the tone of the conversation froze me. It was not the boisterous, performative laughter of the dinner table. It was low, urgent, and conspiratorial. I stepped behind a wide, square concrete pillar. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew those voices. "You are worrying too much. Celeste, the timing is perfect." That was not my father. It was a voice I had not heard in 2 years. Yet it made my skin crawl just as effectively as it had back then. Smooth, confident, and utterly devoid of genuine warmth. Logan Pierce. I pressed my back against the rough concrete. What was Logan doing here? He had not been at the dinner. We had dated during my junior year, a relationship my parents had adored because Logan came from a family of commercial developers and had the ambition of a shark in a suit. I had broken up with him when I realized his interest in me was entirely calculated based on my father's legal connections. "I am not worrying," my mother's voice replied. She sounded impatient, the way she always did when a deal was not closing fast enough. "I just want to make sure the paperwork is airtight. If she asks questions about the trust transfer, we could be delayed until the next fiscal quarter." "She will not ask questions," my father said. His voice was calm, authoritative, the voice he used when he was explaining to a jury why his client was technically innocent despite the evidence. "Nora has never read a legal document in her life. She trusts us implicitly." I held my breath. They were standing perhaps 20 feet away, near where my father's Mercedes was parked in a reserved spot I had not noticed earlier. "Besides," Logan said, and I could practically hear the smirk in his voice, "I can help smooth it over. I am the broker on record, right? I will just tell her that the market is volatile. I will tell her we need to secure the asset to protect her future. You know how she is. She gets anxious about stability." "The Davenport house is a wreck anyway," my mother added. "My mother let that place rot for the last decade. It is a miracle the land value is holding up. We need to sell before the Historical Society tries to designate it a protected landmark. If that happens, we can't tear it down, and the developer walks." My blood ran cold. Davenport House. It was my grandmother's home. It was a sprawling, dusty Victorian on the edge of the historic district, filled with books and the smell of dried lavender. It was the only place in my childhood where I had felt seen. My grandmother had left it to me in her will, or so I thought, when she died 2 years ago. My father had handled the estate. He had told me the house was put into a family management trust to save me from the burden of property taxes while I was in school. He had promised me we would renovate it together one day. Now, standing in the dark garage, I heard the truth. "The developer wants the lot cleared by August," Logan said. "If we get her signature tomorrow, I can have the demolition permits filed by Monday morning. It is a quick flip, easy money." "And you are sure she will sign?" my mother asked. "Celeste," Logan said, his tone dripping with condescending reassurance. "It is Nora. I know which buttons to push. I will just mention graduation gift and startup capital for her little career. She will be so grateful she won't even look at the page numbers." My mother laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "That is true. She is desperate for approval. Just tell her we are proud of her, and she will sign her soul away." I felt a physical wave of nausea. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. It was not just the theft of the house, it was the contempt. They did not just want the money, they enjoyed how easy it was to take it from me. They viewed my trust not as a virtue, but as a flaw to be exploited. Then came my father's voice, lower than before, delivering the final blow. "She won't read it," he said. "She never dares to doubt the family. She is too afraid of losing her seat at the table." The silence that followed was broken only by the beep of a car unlocking. "I will draft the transfer agreement tonight," Logan said. "Bring her by the office tomorrow. Make it look like a celebration." "Good man," my father said. "We will see you then." Car doors opened and closed. An engine roared to life. The smooth purr of a German-engineered V8. I waited until the headlights swept past my pillar and the Mercedes rolled down the ramp toward the exit. I stood there in the darkness for a long time. My legs felt like lead as I walked the remaining distance to my car. I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. The fabric was worn, and the air inside was stale. But it was mine. I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles turned white. I squeezed so hard I thought the plastic might crack under the pressure of my grip. The $500? The image of my father peeling off those bills flashed in my mind. It made sense now. The tip had nothing to do with generosity. It was a display of dominance. He could throw $500 at a stranger for bringing him a plate of fish, but he would steal my grandmother's legacy and tear it down for a developer's check. The money he flashed was a costume. It was a way to say, "I am the one who gives, and I am the one who takes." He thought I was afraid of losing my seat at the table. He was wrong. I had already left the table. I stared at the dashboard. A fierce, cold determination began to rise in my chest, displacing the hurt. They thought they were dealing with the Nora who cried when she didn't get an A-. They thought they were dealing with the Nora who begged for a laptop. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I worked in risk analysis. My job was to look at data, find the anomalies, and predict the catastrophe before it happened. My entire professional training was built on one principle: never trust the surface data. Always dig for the source code. "She won't read it," he had said. I whispered the words to the empty car. "Watch me." I reached into my purse to retrieve my phone to set the GPS for home. Though I knew the way blindly, as the screen lit up, a notification banner slid down from the top. My stomach tightened. It was a text message. Sender: Logan Pierce. Time: 9:42 p.m. "Hey Nora, long time. Your parents just told me you graduated. Huge congrats. We should catch up. Come by the office tomorrow? Your mom and dad want to surprise you with a graduation gift. I think you're going to love it." I stared at the glowing letters. The audacity was breathtaking. He had just finished conspiring to demolish my heritage, and now he was texting me with emojis and false cheer, acting the part of the benevolent friend. A graduation gift. A gift wrapped in lies, tied with a ribbon of manipulation, and containing a demolition order inside. I did not reply. I did not delete the message. Instead, I took a screenshot. Then I opened my Notes app. I created a new folder. I named it Davenport. I started the engine of my Honda. It coughed once before rumbling to life. I backed out of the space, moving slowly, deliberately. As I drove down the spiral ramp of the parking garage, passing the spot where they had stood and laughed at my expense, I felt a shift in the universe. For 22 years, I had been the daughter who nodded. I had been the daughter who signed. I had been the daughter who was grateful for the scraps. Tomorrow, I would walk into that office. I would smile. I would play the part of the naive, wide-eyed graduate. And I would read every single syllable on every single page. The car emerged from the garage into the city lights. I turned right, away from the wealthy district, heading toward my small apartment on the other side of town. The tears I had expected to cry never came. There was no room for sadness anymore. There was only room for the plan. If they wanted a signature, they would get one, but it would not be the one they expected. My studio apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of a siren 2 streets over. I locked the deadbolt, threw my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, and kicked off my heels. I did not turn on the overhead lights. The glow from the street lamps outside filtered through the blinds. casting striped shadows across the floor. Most people who met me saw Nora Whitman, the quiet girl in the back of the lecture hall, the one who took diligent notes and never raised her hand unless called upon. My parents saw an accessory. My ex-boyfriend saw a stepping stone. None of them knew about HarborKite analytics. For the past 11 months, I had not just been a student. I had been working a remote, high-intensity internship for a boutique firm based in Chicago. HarborKite was not the kind of company that advertised on job boards. They specialized in forensic data analysis for corporate litigation. In plain English, we found the money people were trying to hide. We traced the digital footprints of embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. My boss, Mara Quinn, was a woman who could look at a 1,000-page ledger and spot a rounding error that concealed a $1 million theft within 30 seconds. She was terrifying, brilliant, and the only adult I had ever met who respected me. I remembered the first day I found a discrepancy in a client's offshore accounts. I had been nervous, thinking I was overstepping. Mara had looked at my report, then at me, and said the words that had become my gospel. "Nora, the world is full of people who will lie to your face with a smile. If you want to survive, you keep the receipts. Data does not have feelings. It just has memory." I walked over to my desk, a cheap laminate table I had assembled myself, and opened my laptop. It was not the slow, crashing machine from my high school days. I had bought this one with my first paycheck from HarborKite, a high-performance machine capable of running complex predictive models. I sat down and cracked my knuckles. The trembling in my hands had stopped completely. The hurt I had felt at the restaurant was being compartmentalized, shoved into a mental box labeled irrelevant emotions, so that I could focus on the box labeled evidence. My parents thought I was naive. They relied on my perceived ignorance. They assumed that because I never fought back, I wasn't paying attention. But I had been paying attention for a long time. I had a habit that I had never shared with anyone, not even Mara. I archived everything, every email, every text message, every digital receipt, every document my parents had ever sent me. It started when I was 19. That year, my tuition payment had been late. I had been called into the bursar's office, humiliated, and told I would be dropped from my classes if the balance wasn't cleared by Friday. When I called my mother in a panic, she had sighed and told me I was being dramatic, that the money had been sent days ago and the school was just incompetent. I believed her. 2 days later, I saw a post on her Facebook page. They had bought a new boat. The timestamp on the photo was the same day she claimed to have sent my tuition. The check for my school cleared 3 weeks later, incurring a late fee that I had to pay with my cafeteria wages. From that day on, I saved everything. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I needed to know that when they told me it never happened, I could look at a screen and see that it absolutely had. I opened my encrypted hard drive. I did not need to hack into their systems. I just needed to look at what they had already given me, through a lens they didn't know I possessed. I typed Davenport into the search bar of my personal archive. Dozens of files populated the screen, photos of me on the porch with Grandma, scanned birthday cards, and then the legal correspondence. I clicked on a PDF titled Last Will and Testament Agnes Davenport. My grandmother had passed away 2 years ago. I remembered the reading of the will vividly. I remembered my father sitting next to me, holding my hand, a rare gesture of affection that I now realized was actually a form of restraint. He had explained that Grandma left the house to me, but because I was under 25 and still a student, it would be placed in a trust for protection. "It is standard procedure, Nora," he had said. "We will handle the boring administrative stuff. You just focus on your grades." I opened the document. I scrolled to Article 4, Section B. I devise and bequeath my real property located at 412 Abercorn Street, Savannah, Georgia, commonly known as Davenport House, to my granddaughter, Nora Whitman, in fee simple absolute. There was no mention of a trust in the will itself. I frowned, the blue light of the screen reflecting in my eyes. If the will didn't mandate a trust, then I should have been the direct owner on the deed immediately upon probate closing. I switched tabs to the Public Property Records database for Chatham County. This was public information, accessible to anyone who knew how to look. But my parents counted on the fact that people rarely looked. I pulled up the history for 412 Abercorn Street. Transaction date: October 14th, 2 years ago. Grantor: Estate of Agnes Davenport. Grantee: Whitman Family Management, LLC. My heart skipped a beat. They hadn't put it in a trust for me. They had transferred it to an LLC. I quickly opened a new window and searched the Georgia Secretary of State's corporate registry for Whitman Family Management, LLC. Organizer: Graham Whitman. Registered agent: Logan Pierce. I stared at the screen, a cold fury rising in my throat. Logan. He had been involved 2 years ago. We were still dating then. He had sat across from me at dinner, kissed me goodnight, and never once mentioned that he was the registered agent for the company my father used to hijack my inheritance. But how? To transfer the deed from the estate to the LLC, they would have needed a sign-off. As the beneficiary, I would have had to agree to assign my interest to the company. I went back to my archive. I narrowed the search parameters to the month of October, 2 years ago. I scanned the emails. Most were mundane. Mom: Don't forget to buy a dress for the gala. Dad: Forwarded article on interest rates. Then I found it. Subject: Urgent. Scholarship application paperwork. From Celeste Whitman. October 12th, 2 years ago. Nora: Honey, your father found a private scholarship fund through the Bar Association that you qualify for. It is a few $1,000s, but the deadline is tomorrow. I filled out the main form for you to save you time since I know you are studying for midterms. I just need you to sign the signature page attached and scan it back to me ASAP. Love, Mom. I opened the attachment. It was a single page. No header, no text body, just a line for a signature and a date. I remembered this. I had been drowning in organic chemistry notes. I trusted them. I had printed the page, signed it, scanned it, and sent it back within 10 minutes, grateful that they were helping me find money for school. I opened my image editing software. I pulled up the signature page from the scholarship email. Then, I pulled up the recorded deed transfer document from the county website, which I had just downloaded. I overlaid the two signatures. They were an exact match, down to the pixel, down to the slight tremble in the loop of the N. They hadn't used my signature for a scholarship. They had taken that isolated signature page, attached it to a deed of assent, and filed it with the court. They had forged the context of my signature to steal a house worth $500,000. I sat back in my chair, the plastic creaking under my weight. This wasn't just bad parenting. This was fraud. This was a felony. My mother's voice from the garage echoed in my head. She is desperate for approval. She will sign her soul away. They had weaponized my trust. They had turned my love for them into a tool to rob me. And the worst part? They had done it effortlessly. They hadn't even tried hard to hide it because they thought I was too stupid to ever check. I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. I could call a lawyer. I could call the police. But if I did that now, they would circle the wagons. My father was a powerful litigator. He would claim it was a misunderstanding, a clerical error, or that I had known all along and was now changing my mind. He knew the judges. He knew the system. He would crush me in a legal battle before I even got a court date. No, I needed more leverage. I needed to trap them so completely that they couldn't wiggle out. I needed to be exactly who they thought I was, until it was too late. I picked up my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Mara Quinn. It was late, but Mara never slept. She lived on coffee and the thrill of the hunt. I hit dial. It rang twice. Whitman, Mara's voice came through, crisp and alert. It is midnight. You either found a mistake in the Q3 report, or you are in trouble. Which is it? I am not in trouble, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Steady, hollow, dangerous. But someone else is about to be... I heard the sound of a keyboard clacking stop on her end. I am listening. I need access to the proprietary background check software, I said. and I need you to authorize a deep dive asset trace." "On who?" Mara asked. "We don't run traces without a client contract. Nora, you know the protocol." "The target is Graham Whitman," I said, "and Celeste Whitman, and a broker named Logan Pierce." There was a silence on the line. Mara knew who my parents were. I had never complained about them, but she knew the name. "Nora," she said, her tone shifting from boss to mentor, "if you do this, you know you cannot unsee what you find. Family financials are usually the ugliest kind. Are you sure?" I looked at the overlaid signatures on my screen. I looked at the text message from Logan about the graduation gift. I looked at the empty space in my room where a graduation bouquet should have been, but wasn't, because they hadn't bought me one. "I am sure," I said. "I need to check to see what my family is trying to do with my name. I think I'm being set up as a liability shield." "Okay," Mara said. "I am granting you admin clearance now. And Nora?" "Yes?" "If they are using you to launder liability," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "burn them down. I will help you with the matches." "Thank you, Mara." "Don't thank me yet. Get to work. I want a preliminary report by 6 a.m. The line clicked dead. I set the phone down. I turned back to the laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Tomorrow, I would go to my father's office. I would wear a pastel dress. I would smile. I would accept their gift. But tonight, I was going to rip their financial lives apart, transaction by transaction, until I found every skeleton they had ever buried. I began to type. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Whitman and Sterling Law Group building took exactly 45 seconds. I counted them. I watched the numbers climb on the digital display, my reflections staring back at me from the polished brass doors. I had chosen my outfit with surgical precision, a soft, floral dress that I had worn to Easter brunch 3 years ago, a cardigan that was slightly too big, and flat shoes. I had pulled my hair back into a low, loose ponytail. I did not look like the forensic analyst who had spent the previous night uncovering a web of shell companies and forged deeds. I looked like Nora the daughter, Nora the disappointment, Nora the pushover. When the doors opened, the receptionist, a woman named Barb, who had known me since I was 12, gave me a pitying smile. "They are waiting for you in conference room B. Sweetie," she said. "Big day for you, huh?" "Yes," I said, forcing my voice to pitch up, sounding breathless and young. "I am a little nervous." "Don't be," she winked. "Your dad has been in a great mood all morning." I walked down the hallway, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of my footsteps. I knew why he was in a great mood. He thought he was about to close the easiest deal of his career. I pushed open the heavy mahogany doors. The room was freezing. My father always kept the air conditioning low, a power move designed to make clients uncomfortable while he sat warm in his wool suits. He was at the head of the long table. Flanking him were my mother and a man I did not recognize. "There she is," my father boomed, standing up and spreading his arms wide. "The graduate, the woman of the hour." He came around the table and hugged me. It was a performance. His embrace was stiff, and he patted my back twice, the universal signal for release me. "Hi, Dad," I said, letting myself shrink inward, rounding my shoulders. "Oh, look at her," my mother cooed. She was wearing a white blazer that looked pristine and sharp enough to cut glass. She reached out and squeezed my arm. "You look tired. Nora, are you eating enough? You look pale." "I just didn't sleep well," I lied. "I was thinking about everything, about the future." "Well, that is exactly why we are here," my mother said, guiding me to a chair. "We want to take that weight off your shoulders." I sat down. Directly in front of me, in the center of the polished wood table, lay a thick, bound document. The cover page was printed on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, in elegant, embossed font. It read, "The Nora Whitman Career Kickstart Package." Beneath that, in smaller letters, "Asset Management and POA Authorization." It looked legitimate. It looked professional. It looked like a gift. We felt terrible about dinner last night, my father said, leaning back in his leather chair and tenting his fingers. We realized we didn't get a chance to really talk about your next steps. And we know how hard it is for young people these days. The economy is unstable. Rent is astronomical. We didn't want you to struggle like we did. I bit the inside of my cheek. My father had inherited his first firm from his uncle. He had never struggled a day in his life. We put this together for you, my mother added, her eyes shimmering with unshed, artificial tears. It is a comprehensive plan. We are going to set up a managed fund for you. We will handle the investments, the taxes, the boring stuff. You will just get a monthly stipend to help you while you look for a job. A stipend? I asked, widening my eyes. $2,000 a month, my father said generously, for the first year, so you can focus on finding the right job, not just any job. He said it as if he were handing me a winning lottery ticket. $2,000. It wouldn't even cover rent and utilities in a safe neighborhood in Savannah. But I nodded, acting overwhelmed. That is so much, I stammered. My father continued, gesturing to the man beside him. This is Mr. Henderson. He is an independent associate who drafted the paperwork, just to keep everything official. Mr. Henderson did not smile. He looked at his watch. Pleasure, he grunted. The only thing is, my mother interjected, leaning forward, to set this up, we need to consolidate the assets. That includes the old house Grandma left. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face blank. Davenport House? It is a money pit, Nora, a voice said from the doorway. I turned. Logan Pierce was leaning against the frame, wearing a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too bright. He walked into the room with the confidence of a man who already counted his commission. Logan, I said, letting my voice waver, what are you doing here? Your dad asked me to consult on the real estate portion, Logan said, pulling out a chair next to me and sitting too close. He smelled of peppermint and ambition. Look, Nora, I will be honest with you. The market in that district is crashing. The foundation of Davenport is cracking. If you hold on to it, you are looking at $50,000 in repairs just to keep it up to code. It is a liability, not an asset. 50,000? I whispered, putting a hand to my chest. At least, Logan said, shaking his head gravely. But because I have some connections, I can offload it quickly. We bundle it into the trust, sell it before the inspector condemns it, and the proceeds go right into your managed fund. You won't have to lift a finger. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. I had seen the inspection report in my grandmother's files 3 years ago. The foundation was solid stone. The crashing market was actually the hottest historic district boom in 20 years. They were trying to scare me into selling a gold mine for the price of scrap metal. I didn't know it was that bad, I said. Conrad worked very hard to structure this, so you are protected, my mother said, her voice dropping to a guilt-inducing whisper. Your father stayed up until 2 a.m. reviewing these terms. He just wants you to be safe. Nora, you know that, right? I know, I said. It is a lot of paperwork. It is standard boilerplate, Mr. Henderson said, tapping his pen on the table. I have a closing at 11 o'clock, so we should probably get to the signatures. The pressure was subtle but suffocating. The busy lawyer, the caring parents, the expert ex-boyfriend, they were boxing me in from all sides. My father slid the document toward me. He flipped it open to the back page. Yellow sticky notes with arrows indicated where I should sign. Just here, here, and here, he said. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled. This time, it wasn't acting. I was about to sign a document that would technically give them legal power over me, but I needed them to believe they had won. I needed them to drop their guard so the real investigation could finish. Can I look at the rest of it? I asked, hesitating with the pen hovering over the paper. My father's smile tightened at the corners. Nora, honey, it is 40 pages of legal jargon. It will just confuse you. I know, I said apologetically, But Grandma always said I should look at the pictures. I tried to make it a joke. There are no pictures, my mother snapped, then quickly softened her tone. We are just trying to save time. Sweetie, Mr. Henderson has to leave. Just a quick look, I said. I flipped the page back, pretending to be looking for something specific but nonsensical. Is my middle name spelled right? They always get it wrong. It is spelled right, Logan said, sounding annoyed. I flipped another page. I was scanning the text rapidly. My eyes trained by months of reviewing contracts at Harbor Kite. I wasn't reading for comprehension of the trust. I was looking for the trap. And then I saw it. It was buried in a paragraph on page 32, under the section labeled Miscellaneous Provisions. Clause 14b. By execution of this agreement, the beneficiary, Nora Whitman, hereby irrevocably waives, releases, and discharges the trustees, Graham and Celeste Whitman, from any and all claims, liabilities, causes of action, or demands, known or unknown, past, present, or future, regarding the management of the estate or any prior financial guardianship. I felt a chill run down my spine that was colder than the air conditioning. This wasn't just about the house. Past, present, or future. They knew. Somewhere, deep down, they knew they had been misusing my funds for years. Maybe the tuition money, maybe the scholarship fraud I found last night, maybe accounts I hadn't even discovered yet. This document wasn't a kickstart, it was a retroactive pardon. If I signed this, I couldn't sue them for the theft of Davenport House. I couldn't sue them for the forgery. I couldn't sue them for anything. Nora? My father asked. His voice had lost its warmth. Is there a problem? I looked up. They were all staring at me. 3 predators and a bored lawyer. I had to sign. If I didn't sign, they would know I was onto them. They would destroy the evidence, hide the money, and lock me out before I could build a criminal case. I needed to sign to make them think the door was closed, so they would stop watching the windows. But I needed proof of what I was signing. No problem, I said, smiling weakly. It looks very thorough. I turned back to the signature page. I signed my name, Nora Whitman. I made sure to sign it exactly as I always did, sloppy and looped, the signature they had forged so easily. I signed the second line, and the third. My father let out a breath he had been holding. The tension in the room snapped, replaced by a palpable wave of relief. Good girl, he said. He reached for the document. Wait, I said. I kept my hand on the folder. Can I keep a copy just for a souvenir? It is my first big financial contract. I want to frame the cover page or something. My mother laughed, a high, relieved tinkle. Oh, Nora, you are so sentimental, always hoarding scraps. I can print a copy, Mr. Henderson grumbled, standing up. Actually, my father said, checking his own watch, we don't have time to wait for the copier to warm up and collate 40 pages. Henderson is already late. My stomach dropped. I needed that document. Tell you what, Logan said smoothly. I have the digital file. I will email it to you later. Nora. He wouldn't, or he would email me a version without Clause 14b. Please, I said, looking at my father. I just want to read it tonight, to feel like an adult. My father looked at me. He saw the frayed cardigan. He saw the cheap shoes. He saw the daughter who had just signed away a $500,000 asset for a $2,000 allowance. He saw zero threat. Fine, he said, pulling a secondary, unbound copy from his briefcase. Take the draft copy. It is the same thing. But don't lose it. I don't want your financial details floating around a coffee shop. He slid the stack of papers across the table. I took it. I held it to my chest like a schoolbook. Thank you, Daddy, I said. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. We are so proud of you, my mother said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. She didn't hug me this time. She didn't need to. The transaction was complete. Now, we have a lunch reservation at the old Pink House to celebrate. You go on ahead. We need to finish up some filing with Mr. Henderson. Okay, I said. I stood up. I walked to the door. I could feel their eyes on my back, but not in a suspicious way anymore. They were looking at me with dismissal. I was done. Processed. Handled. "See you there," Logan called out. "I am ordering champagne." I walked out of the conference room. I walked past Barb at the reception desk. I stepped into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of the law office, I slumped against the metal wall. I clutched the document so hard the pages crinkled. I had signed. I had given them the house. I had waived my rights. Technically, I had just ruined my own life. But as the elevator began its descent, I opened the folder to page 32. I stared at the waiver clause. They thought this clause protected them. They thought it was a shield. But they had forgotten one thing about contracts. A contract based on fraud is void ab initio, from the beginning. By making me sign this waiver to cover up their crimes, they had just handed me the physical proof of their intent to defraud. They had documented their own cover-up. I pulled out my phone. I had a message from Mara Quinn. "Report ready. You're going to want to sit down for this. It is worse than we thought." I looked at the floor numbers ticking down. 40, 39, 38. "Enjoy the champagne, Logan," I whispered to the empty elevator. "It is going to be the most expensive drink you ever have." I drove straight from the law office to a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town. A place with flickering fluorescent lights and burnt coffee, far removed from the artisanal roasters my parents frequented. I needed neutral ground. I set the thick document on the table next to my latte and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. The act was over. The work had begun. I spent the next 40 minutes photographing every single page of the career kickstart package, ensuring the lighting was clear and the text legible. I uploaded the files to a secure cloud server, then sent the link to Mara Quinn and a contact she had vetted for me earlier that morning, Elliot Haynes. Elliot was a forensic accountant turned contract lawyer based in Atlanta. He was the kind of guy who didn't care about the spirit of the law, only the letter of it. Mara called him the shark repellent. I put in my earbuds and dialed into a conference line. "I have the files," Elliot's voice came through, dry and raspy, like he had been smoking for 20 years. Looking at them now, Mara is on the line too. "I see it," Mara said. "Nora, tell me you did not sign this without a witness." "I signed it," I said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. "In front of them, but I have the physical copy they gave me, and I found the waiver clause." "Clause 14B," Elliot said, the sound of rapid typing in the background. "I am reading it. It is nasty work. Nora, standard predatory language, but wrapped in family trust law, so it looks soft. Effectively, by signing this, you have agreed to transfer the deed of Davenport House into the Whitman Family Management Trust. That part is clear, but look at Schedule C on page 38. I flipped to the back of the document. Schedule C was a dense wall of text about liability assumption. "I see it," I said. "It talks about shared debt obligations." "It is not just shared," Elliot corrected. "It is a transfer. They are moving the house into the trust, but they are attaching existing liabilities from the trust to the house. Basically, the trust is currently carrying debt. Looks like bad commercial loans, or maybe a failed development deal. They are using the clean asset of your grandmother's house as collateral to refinance their bad debt. Once the house is in the trust, the bank can seize it if they default. So they are not selling it to a developer," I realized, my stomach tightening. "They are mortgaging it to save themselves." "Exactly," Mara chimed in. "And because you signed the waiver in Clause 14B, if the bank takes the house, you cannot sue your parents for losing your inheritance. You agreed that their management decisions are unassailable." I closed my eyes. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just stealing the value. They were using my grandmother's legacy as a sandbag to stop their own financial ship from sinking. "I overheard them," I said, my voice low. "At the restaurant, my father tipped the waiter $500 to show off, and then I heard him tell his friends that I was just a resume patter for the family. He said I would never read the fine print." "Classic narcissism," Elliot grunted. They underestimate the opponent because they don't believe the opponent exists. They think you are an extension of them, not a separate person. Grandma used to say something like that, I murmured. She said, "The people who look down on you will never check the small print because they don't think you know how to write." Well, they are about to find out you can write, Mara said. Nora, look at the date on the trust execution. When does this transfer officially finalize? I scanned the document. Effective upon the first business day of the subsequent month following signature. June 1st, I said. That is 5 days from now. We have 5 days to kill this deal, Elliot said. Or rather, 5 days to make them kill it themselves. I don't want to just stop it, I said, staring at the coffee stain on the table. If I just stop it, they will find another way. They will guilt me, or forge another document, or wait until I'm vulnerable. I need to end this dynamic, permanently. What is the leverage? Mara asked. What do they want more than the money? I thought about the dinner, the posturing, the photos, the desperate need to be seen as the golden couple of Savannah. Reputation, I said. My father is running for something. I saw a flyer on his desk. The Board of Governors for the State Bar Association. It is a prestigious position. He needs to look like a pillar of ethics. A candidate for the Bar Association cannot have an active investigation for fraud or fiduciary mismanagement, Elliot said. That is an immediate disqualification. And money, I added. They are greedy. They aren't doing this just to cover debt. They are doing it because they think they are getting a windfall. I looked closer at the document, past the scary liability clauses, to a section I had missed earlier, Appendix A, Distribution of Surplus Funds. It stated that any funds generated by the trust in excess of the debt service would be directed to a priority member. Elliot, I said, who is the priority member defined as? Checking, Elliot muttered. Ah, here it is. Priority member is defined as the managing partners of Whitman and Sterling Law Group. My father, I said. He is paying off his debt with my house, and then paying himself any profit left over. But here is the catch, Elliot said, his voice taking on a darker, amused tone. Look at the clause regarding conflict of interest disclosure. It says that all parties certify that no external liens exist on the collateral property. So, Elliot said, if there was a lien on Davenport House, say, a mechanic's lien, or a historical preservation restriction, or a pending litigation notice, then transferring it into the trust would trigger a default clause in their loan agreement with the bank. The bank would immediately freeze the trust's assets to investigate fraud. They would lose access to their own money, I said, realizing the implication. And the Bar Association would hear about a bank fraud investigation. Exactly, Mara said. But Davenport House is clean, isn't it? I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. It is clean today. Nora, Mara warned, don't do anything illegal. I won't, I said. I am just going to be a very diligent granddaughter. I hung up the phone. The plan was forming in my mind like a complex data model coming together. Step 1. Maintain the illusion. I went to the lunch at the old pink house. I sat there for 2 hours while my parents drank champagne and toasted to my bright future. I played the part perfectly. I thanked them for the stipend. I asked Logan for advice on which car I should buy with my allowance. I let them believe I was exactly where they wanted me, in their pocket. You made the right choice, Nora, my father said, his face flushed with alcohol and victory. This trust is going to take care of you. I know, Dad, I said. I trust you completely. Step 2. The trap. That afternoon, while they were sleeping off their boozy lunch, I went to the Hall of Records. I didn't go to file a lawsuit. I went to the Historical Preservation Office. I had done my research on Davenport House years ago. I knew it had been built in 1890 by a local architect who was significant to Savannah's history. I had the paperwork in my grandmother's files proving its lineage. I filed an emergency application for historical landmark status. Usually, this process took months, but there was a provision in the city code. Article 6, Section 9, that allowed for an interim protection order to be placed on a property immediately upon filing if there was a credible threat of demolition. I attached the text message from Logan. I can have the demolition permits filed by Monday morning. That was the threat. The clerk stamped the document. This puts a temporary hold on the title, hun. It shows up as a cloud on the deed until the hearing. You understand that? I understand, I said. Thank you. That cloud on the deed was the lien Elliot had talked about. It was now public record. Step 3. The bait. I knew my parents wouldn't check the public records. They were arrogant. They thought the deal was done. But the bank that held their massive debt would check. Banks always run a final title search 48 hours before funding a new loan structure. My parents were expecting the trust to be funded and their debts to be covered on June 1st. On May 30th, the bank would run the search. They would see the historical protection filing. They would see the credible threat of demolition evidence provided by the owner, me. And they would see that Graham Whitman had signed a document claiming the property was unencumbered. It was a trap that would snap shut without me ever raising my voice. But I needed to make sure the timing was maximum impact. I went home and opened my laptop. I drafted an email to the Savannah Bar Association. I didn't send it yet. I just attached the forged signature analysis Mara had helped me prepare, and the transcript of the audio recording from the garage where my father admitted I was a resume patter. I saved it as a draft. Then, I looked at the calendar. 3 days from now, my parents were hosting a victory party. Ostensibly, it was for my graduation. In reality, it was a campaign kickoff for my father's bar association run. The invite list included judges, city council members, and the partners of every major firm in the state. They wanted a perfect family photo. They wanted the dutiful daughter standing next to the benevolent father. They were going to get the daughter they created. I spent the next 2 days in a state of eerie calm. I answered my mother's texts about what dress I should wear. I confirmed with Logan that I would love to hear more about his investment ideas at the party. I was not the victim anymore. I was the architect. On the morning of the party, I received an alert from Mara. The bank just pulled the credit report on the trust. They saw the historical filing. My contact in risk compliance says the red flags are flying. They are sending a notice of breach to your father's firm this afternoon. Perfect. The letter would arrive at his office around 4 p.m. He would be leaving for the party at 5 p.m. He might not see it until Monday. Or, if he checked his email, he would see it right before he had to stand up and give a speech about his integrity. But I had one more card to play, the hidden clause that they thought was their safety net. I pulled out the physical copy of the document I had signed. I turned to the schedule of assets. I had noticed something else when I was photographing the pages in the coffee shop. Something so arrogant, it was almost funny. In the list of assets being transferred to the trust, my father had included not just Davenport House, but also future acquired capital. And in the fine print of the Kickstart package, there was a reciprocal clause. The grantor, my father, agrees to match any external capital contributions made by the beneficiary, me, into the trust up to 100%, to encourage savings. He had put that in there to look generous. He assumed I would maybe put in $100 from a birthday check, and he would match it. It was a throwaway line to make him look like a philanthropist. He didn't know about my savings from Harbor Kite. I had been living on instant noodles, but I had been earning a junior analyst salary plus overtime for a year. I had saved nearly $25,000. If I deposited that money into the trust account before the bank froze it, he would be legally contractually obligated to match it with his own cash, $25,000 from his personal account. And because the bank was about to freeze the trust due to the fraud investigation, that money, his money, would be locked up tight. I logged into my bank account. I initiated a wire transfer to the account number listed in the Kickstart paperwork. Amount, $25,000. Memo, initial capital contribution. Thanks for the match, Dad. I hit send. I watched the progress bar load. Transfer complete. I sat back. I had just locked my own savings away. Yes, but I had also just legally forced him to liquidate $25,000 of his own cash into a frozen account right when he needed liquidity the most. I stood up and walked to my closet. I pushed aside the clearance rack clothes and pulled out the dress I had bought yesterday. It wasn't pastel. It wasn't floral. It was a deep, sharp crimson. I dressed slowly. I did my makeup with precision. I looked in the mirror. The girl looking back wasn't Nora the accessory. She wasn't Nora the victim. She was Nora the analyst, and she had just found the fatal error in the system. I grabbed my purse. Inside was the envelope containing the tip receipt I had retrieved from the restaurant trash, a humiliating dive, but worth it, and the highlighted copy of Clause 14B. It was time to go to the party. The driveway of my childhood home was lined with cars that cost more than the average American house. Porsches, Teslas, and vintage Jaguars were parked in a herringbone pattern that my mother had likely diagrammed on a napkin weeks ago to maximize visual impact. The house itself, a sprawling colonial revival with white columns that gleamed under the floodlights, looked less like a home and more like a stage set for a play about the American dream. I walked up the front steps, my heels clicking on the brick. I was not wearing the crimson dress I had put on earlier. That dress, the armor I had chosen for myself, was currently folded in the trunk of my car. When I had arrived 10 minutes ago, my mother had met me at the side door, taken one look at the red silk, and shook her head with a tight, pained smile. "Absolutely not. Nora," she had said, as if I had arrived wearing a clown suit. "Red is for the person in charge. You are the beneficiary. You need to look grateful, not aggressive. Go change." I laid out the beige chiffon in the mudroom. So here I was, wearing the beige chiffon. It was high-necked, long-sleeved, and the color of weak tea. It was a dress designed to make the wearer disappear into the wallpaper. It was a dress for a prop. I entered the foyer. The air smelled of expensive lilies and ambition. The room was packed with the elite of Savannah's legal and political circles. I recognized Judge Holloway, who was rumored to be retiring soon, and Councilman Miller, whose zoning votes were suspiciously aligned with Logan's development projects. "There she is," my father's voice boomed over the crowd. He was standing by the grand piano, holding a glass of scotch. He looked the part of the benevolent patriarch perfectly. His silver hair was coiffed. His suit was tailored to within an inch of its life, and his smile was wide enough to hide all the teeth. "Everyone, this is Nora," he announced, beckoning me over. "The reason we are celebrating tonight." I walked toward him. The crowd parted. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, assessing, calculating. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a metric of Graham Whitman's success. A successful man raises a successful daughter. My father wrapped an arm around my shoulder, pulling me tight against his side. It felt like being held by a boa constrictor. "Nora just graduated with honors," my father said, beaming at the room. "Data analytics, smart girl, takes after her mother." Laughter rippled through the room. My mother, standing on his other side, laughed the loudest. "We are just so proud," my father continued, his voice shifting into a lower, more serious register, the tone he used for closing arguments. "You know, in this economy, it is hard for young people to get a foothold. That is why Celeste and I decided that we weren't just going to give her a pat on the back. We are investing in her. We have set up a comprehensive support fund to help her launch her own firm right here in Savannah." He paused for effect. The room murmured in approval. "Because that is what family does," he said, raising his glass. "We lift each other up, to Nora, and to the future." "To the future," the crowd echoed. I smiled. My face hurt from the effort. I raised my empty hand, pretending to toast. "Yes, Dad, to the future. Just not the one you think." As the toast broke up and the jazz band resumed playing, my mother leaned in, her hand gripping my elbow with surprising strength. "Don't slouch," she hissed, "and go say hello to Mr. Sterling. He is the one who approved the partnership track for your father." I moved through the room like a remote-controlled doll. I shook hands. I nodded. I answered the same questions over and over. Yes, it was a rigorous program. Yes, I am excited to stay in Savannah. No, I don't have a boyfriend. I am focused on my career. I found myself cornered near the buffet by Mrs. Sterling and my mother. Nora was always such a spirited child, my mother was saying, wearing a look of saintly patience. I remember when she was 7. She refused to wear shoes for a month, just stubborn. We really had to work hard to guide her toward more productive choices. It hasn't always been easy, has it, Nora? She looked at me, her eyes daring me to contradict her. She was building the narrative. Nora is difficult. Nora needs managing. Look how good we are for tolerating her. You were very patient. Mom, I said, my voice sweet and hollow. I don't know how you did it. Mrs. Sterling patted my mother's arm. Well, she certainly turned out well. You did a marvelous job. Celeste. We try, my mother sighed, accepting the praise like a tithe. I excused myself, claiming I needed water. As I turned away, I almost collided with Logan. He was holding court with 2 junior associates, looking like he had already won the election himself. He saw me and smirked, stepping into my path. Great party, huh? He said, swirling his drink. Your dad really went all out. It is very impressive, I said. Logan leaned in close, invading my personal space. I sent the demolition crew a preliminary schedule for next week. Once the transfer clears on the 1st, we move fast. I'm going to turn that old house into a 12-unit luxury condo complex. The Davenport Lofts has a ring to it, right? He expected me to be impressed. He expected me to be grateful that he was bulldozing my childhood memories to build generic glass boxes. You really have it all figured out, Logan, I said. That is why your dad likes me. He winked. I execute. By the way, nice dress. Much better than that rags you usually wear. Fits the brand. The brand, I repeated. The Whitman brand, he said, clinking his glass against an invisible barrier. We are all part of it now. Don't worry. Nora, stick with us, and you will never have to worry about a bill again. He patted my shoulder and moved on to charm a city councilman. I watched him go. The arrogance was suffocating. He didn't just think he was winning. He thought the game was already over. I scanned the room, needing a visual anchor. I found him standing near the French doors that led to the patio. Elliot Haynes. He was dressed in a charcoal suit that was expensive but unflashy. He held a glass of mineral water and looked like just another boring lawyer. But I saw his eyes. They were sharp, moving constantly, recording everything. He caught my gaze and gave a microscopic nod. Witness located. He was here to testify, if needed, that my father had publicly declared his financial solvency and his intent to invest in me, contradicting the hidden debt shuffling in the trust documents. I took a deep breath and headed toward the bar to get some actual water. The heat in the room was rising, fueled by body warmth and ego. Sparkling or still, miss? The voice stopped me. It was familiar. I looked up at the bartender. He was wearing a crisp white tuxedo shirt and a black bow tie. He was young, with dark hair and eyes that looked tired but kind. It was him. The waiter from the Gray, the one my father had tipped $500 3 nights ago. For a second, I couldn't speak. The irony was so sharp it almost cut. You, I whispered. He paused, holding a bottle of Pellegrino. He looked at me, squinting slightly, and then recognition dawned on his face. He looked down at the counter, then back at me, his expression shifting to one of awkwardness. You were at the restaurant, he said quietly. Tuesday night, with the gentleman who tipped big. That is my father, I said. He looked over my shoulder at Graham Whitman, who was currently laughing loudly at his own joke in the center of the room. Small world, the waiter said. He sounded uneasy. The agency sent me here. I didn't know it was the same family. Of course you didn't, I said. And I bet my father requested the premium service team, didn't he? He did, the waiter admitted. He He asked for the specific team that worked the VIP section at the Gray, said he wanted people who know how to treat winners. I almost laughed. My father had hired the same staff so he could continue his power trip. He wanted the waiter here as a prop, just like he wanted me. He wanted to look at this young man and feel benevolent, the great provider who drops $500 tips like confetti. The waiter poured my water. His hand was steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He didn't like them. He had taken the money because he needed it, but he saw through them just as clearly as I did. I took the glass. I leaned in slightly across the bar, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "What is your name?" I asked. "Kevin," he said. "Kevin," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Do you remember what they said that night, after I left the table?" Kevin stiffened. He wiped the counter with a cloth, looking down. I try not to listen to the customers. Miss, it is part of the job." "You heard them," I said. It wasn't a question. "You were clearing the dessert plates. You were right there when my father told the table that I was just a resume patter, that I was a prop." Kevin stopped wiping. He looked up. There was a flash of anger in his eyes. Not at me, but for me. "Yeah," he said softly. "I heard it. He said you were an investment that finally matured, like a bond." It was a confirmation I didn't know I needed. My father hadn't just insulted me. He had dehumanized me in front of the very people he paid to serve him. "Listen to me, Kevin," I said. "Tonight is going to be a little different. You are going to see some things happen later. People are going to be upset. My father is going to be upset." Kevin looked at the room, then back at me. "Is that right?" "Yes," I said. "When that happens, I want you to do exactly what you are doing now. Pour the drinks, clear the glasses, be the perfect professional." I reached into my small clutch purse. I didn't have cash. I didn't have $500 to throw around to buy loyalty, but I had something else. "And Kevin," I said, "you don't need to be grateful to him. The tip he gave you, it wasn't for you. It was for him. He bought his own ego with that money." Kevin nodded slowly. "I figured that out when he made sure the whole restaurant saw him do it." "Exactly," I said. "Tonight, you are not a prop. You are a witness. Just keep your eyes open." "I see everything, Miss Whitman," Kevin said. "Bartenders always do." "Good," I said. "And call me Nora. The Miss Whitman who lived here doesn't exist anymore." I turned away from the bar, glass in hand. I looked back at the center of the room. My father was tapping a spoon against his champagne flute again, calling for silence. It was time for the main speech, the campaign announcement. I walked to the edge of the crowd, positioning myself near the exit, but still in the line of sight. The stage was set, the actors were in place, the audience was captivated, and they had no idea that the script had been rewritten. The phone in my clutch buzzed against my hip, a sharp, insistent vibration that cut through the low hum of jazz and polite conversation. I didn't need to look to know who it was, but I pulled the device out anyway, shielding the screen from the prying eyes of the councilman's wife standing 3 feet away. Sender. Mom. Time, 7:12 p.m. Remember to thank us when your father calls you up. Keep it short. Smile. And do not say anything weird. We have important people here. I stared at the pixels. Do not say anything weird. In my mother's vocabulary, weird was a synonym for truthful. She wanted the sanitized version of her daughter, the one who existed only to reflect their glory back at them. She wanted me to play the role of the grateful charity case so they could play the role of the benevolent saints. I slid the phone back into my bag, but I didn't lock it. I needed it ready. My parents were operating under a delusion of safety. They believed that because I had signed the papers in the office, the Davenport house was secured, the loan was guaranteed, and their financial bleeding was staunched. But there was a bigger game being played tonight, one I had only fully understood after Mara and Elliot ran the background checks on the guest list. The VIPs in the room, Mr. Sterling, the partners from the venture capital firm, the bank representatives, were not just here for champagne. They were here to vet Graham Whitman for the Savannah Heritage Growth Fund. It was a massive influx of local capital designed to prop up legacy businesses in the district. To qualify, a firm had to demonstrate two things: absolute solvency and zero liability risk. My father was currently insolvent, hiding his debts behind shell companies. And as for liability, the document I held in my hand, the very document he had forced me to sign to save me, was about to become the radioactive evidence that would destroy his eligibility. I moved through the crowd, skirting the edges of the room. The air conditioning was working overtime to combat the body heat of 100 wealthy socialites. But I felt a distinct chill. It was the cold clarity of the countdown. I stopped near a large potted fern by the patio doors, a vantage point that gave me a clear view of the stage, the area in front of the fireplace where a microphone stand had been set up. Nearby, Logan Pierce was talking to a man I recognized as the vice president of commercial lending for the bank holding my father's debt. Logan was leaning against a pillar, swirling his drink, looking flushed and confident. "It is all about asset liquidity, Jim," Logan was saying, his voice carrying over the music. "Graham has the portfolio locked down. We are closing on a legacy property transfer this week that significantly strengthens the collateral base. Once the paper clears on Tuesday, everything flows." "Glad to hear it," the banker replied, looking bored but reassured. "Compliance was asking about some delays in the Q1 filing." "Paperwork errors," Logan waved a hand dismissively. "You know how it is. But the house is the key. Pure equity. No encumbrances." I took a sip of my water to hide my smile. No encumbrances. Logan was lying to a bank officer in a room full of witnesses. He was staking his professional reputation on the cleanliness of the Davenport title. He had no idea that at that very moment, a clerk at the Hall of Records was processing my interim protection order, creating a legal cloud over the deed that would flag the property as disputed in the bank system by tomorrow morning. But I wasn't going to wait for tomorrow morning. My phone buzzed again, 2 short vibrations. This was the signal I had been waiting for. I checked the notification. It was an email from Mara. Subject: Analysis complete. Exhibits A and B. Attached is the forensic overlay of the signature from the scholarship application versus the deed of assent. We found digital artifacts on the deed signature that prove it was a copy-paste job. Pixelation around the ink strokes doesn't match the resolution of the rest of the document. It is clumsy. Nora, if this goes to a DA, it is not just fraud. It is forgery in the first degree. I opened the attachment. It was a high-contrast image. On the left, my genuine signature from the school form. On the right, the signature on the deed transferring my house to their company 2 years ago. They were identical, not similar. Mathematically identical. No human signs their name exactly the same way twice. The variance was 0. It was absolute proof of a digital forgery. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp, but I tamped it down. Anger causes mistakes. I needed to be ice. This file was my nuclear option. The Kickstart package with the waiver clause was enough to ruin their business deal. But this was enough to put them in handcuffs. I wasn't planning to send them to jail tonight. I didn't want the spectacle of police cars in the driveway. That was messy. And it made me look like a hysterical daughter destroying her family. No, I wanted something more surgical. I wanted them to realize, in front of everyone they wanted to impress, that they were standing on a trapdoor and I was holding the lever. The music died down. The chatter in the room softened to a respectful hush. My father walked to the microphone. He adjusted his tie, shot a dazzling smile at the front row where the bank executive sat, and tapped the mic. Testing, testing. Can everyone hear me? A polite ripple of laughter and applause. "Thank you all for coming," Graham Whitman said. His voice was rich, commanding, the voice of a man who believed his own myth. "Tonight is a special night for the Whitman family. We are celebrating not just a graduation, but a legacy." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the key players. "You all know me as a lawyer," he continued. "You know me as a fighter for this community, but the most important title I hold is father. My mother, standing a few feet away from him, clasped her hands together and looked at him with adoring eyes. It was a masterclass in performance art. "And as a father," he said, "my job is to protect the future. That is why, tonight, I am so proud to announce that Celeste and I are launching a new initiative, the Nora Whitman Entrepreneurial Grant." I stiffened. That wasn't in the paperwork. He was improvising. He was using my name to create a fake charitable front, probably to launder more money or get a tax write-off. "We are starting this fund with a significant personal contribution," he lied, "to help my daughter, and eventually other young women in Savannah, build their dreams, because we believe in putting our money where our values are." The room erupted in applause. The banker nodded approvingly. "Mr. Sterling looked impressed. "Nora," my father called out, scanning the crowd. "Where is my girl? Come up here." This was it. The spotlight swung around, searching for me. I took a deep breath. I reached into my clutch and tapped the screen of my phone. Voice memo. Recording started. I wasn't doing this to capture his speech. I was doing it to capture what happened next. I needed an objective record. I needed proof that I wasn't screaming, that I wasn't crazy, and that I didn't threaten them. When they inevitably tried to spin this tomorrow, telling people I had a mental breakdown or was on drugs, I would have the audio file of my calm, steady voice dismantling their lie. I walked out from the shadow of the fern. The spotlight found me. The beige dress looked washed out under the harsh light, but I held my head high. I walked through the crowd. People patted my arm as I passed. "Congratulations," they whispered. "Lucky girl." I reached the front of the room. My father extended his hand. I took it. His palm was damp. He was nervous. Despite the bravado, he pulled me up to stand beside him. "Here she is," he said, beaming. "The graduate." He leaned into the mic. "Nora, your mother and I wanted to do this publicly because we want you to know that the whole community is behind you. We have set up the trust, we have handled the assets, and we have made sure your future is secure. All you have to do is fly." He handed me a prop check. It was a giant piece of cardboard, printed with the amount, $5,000. It was a joke, a prop check for $5,000, while he was stealing a house worth $500,000 and locking away my $25,000 savings. I took the check. I held it. The applause started again. My mother stepped forward, expecting me to hug them, to cry, to say thank you. I didn't move. I waited until the applause died down. I waited until the silence stretched just a little too long, until it became awkward. "Thank you, Dad," I said. My voice was projected clearly, even without the mic, because the room was so quiet. "This is a lovely gesture." My father's smile flickered. He sensed the tone shift. "Of course, sweetheart." "But I think there has been a mistake with the paperwork," I said. My mother froze. "Nora, not now," she hissed through her teeth, keeping her smile fixed. "No, it is important," I said, raising my voice slightly so the banker in the front row could hear. "You mentioned the trust is secure, and that the assets are clean." "Nora," my father said, his grip on my shoulder tightening painfully. "We will discuss the details at home." "But we are home," I said innocently, "and these are your partners. They should know how generous you are." I reached into my clutch. I didn't pull out the forgery proof yet. I pulled out the envelope containing the Kickstart package waiver. "I read the document you made me sign yesterday," I said. "Clause 14B. My father went pale. He knew the clause. He wrote it. "It says that by signing, I waive the right to sue you for any past mismanagement of my funds," I said, "which is standard, I guess. But it also says that you, as trustees, accept full liability for any pre-existing debts attached to the collateral." "Nora, stop." Logan stepped forward from the side, losing his cool. "You don't know what you are reading." "I think I do," I said, turning to look at Logan. "Because I also read the loan agreement you filed with the bank, the one where you certified that the Davenport house has no disputes." The banker in the front row sat up straighter. "It doesn't," my father snapped. "It is your house. You signed it over." "I did," I said. "But before I did, I filed a historic preservation lien on the property to protect it from demolition." The room went deadly silent. Logan looked like he had been shot. "You did what?" "I filed it yesterday," I said calmly, "which means when you transfer the title on Monday, you will be transferring a contested asset into a trust that is contractually forbidden from holding contested assets. And since you just announced to Mr. Sterling and the venture group that your portfolio is clean," I let the sentence hang. My father looked at the banker. The banker was already typing on his phone. "You little," my mother started, stepping toward me, her mask falling away completely. "And," I continued, cutting her off, "since the trust is now technically under audit risk, the $25,000 I wired into it this morning, my life savings, is frozen, which means, per the matching clause you wrote, Dad, your $25,000 is frozen too." My father looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the first honest look he had given me in years. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered harsh enough for the mic to catch a faint distortion. "We gave you everything." "You gave me a prop check," I said, dropping the cardboard rectangle on the floor. "And you tipped a waiter more than you spent on my dental work." I turned to the crowd. "Enjoy the party," I said. I believe my father has some explaining to do to his investors about why he tried to leverage a protected historic landmark to cover his firm's insolvency. I walked off the stage. I expected shouting, I expected chaos, but what I got was a vacuum. The silence was absolute. The elite of Savannah were frozen, their eyes darting between the ruin of my father's face and the straight back of the daughter walking away. I passed Kevin, the waiter, near the bar. He was standing perfectly still, holding a tray of champagne. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible salute with his free hand. I walked out the front door, into the cool night air. My phone was still recording in my bag, capturing the muffled sound of a room exploding into whispers. The silence I left behind in the ballroom didn't last. As I pushed through the heavy front doors and stepped onto the portico, I heard my father's voice rise again, desperate and amplified by the microphone. He was trying to patch the hole I had just blown in his hull. "She is just overwhelmed," his voice boomed, echoing slightly against the columns of the house. I paused on the brick step, hidden by the shadows of the oversized planters. Through the open French doors, I could see him raising his champagne flute with a trembling hand. A big transition, very emotional. She knows she is lucky to have us guiding her, to family. He was toasting to his own delusion. He was betting that if he acted like nothing had happened, the crowd would play along, and to be fair, in Savannah society, denial was a favorite pastime. I didn't turn back to scream. I didn't storm in to argue. That was what a child would do. That was what the old Nora would have done, cry and beg to be understood. Instead, I walked down the steps, the gravel of the driveway crunching softly under my beige heels. I went straight to my car, parked far back in the shadows, away from the valet stand. I unlocked the door and reached into the passenger seat. There was one last thing I had to do. I picked up a thick manila envelope. Inside wasn't a lawsuit, and it wasn't a tearful letter. It was a complete, notarized copy of the Kickstart package, with Clause 14B highlighted in neon yellow, clipped together with the bank's fraud alert notice that Mara had forwarded to me. I walked back toward the house. I didn't go into the ballroom. I didn't need to see them again. I stopped in the foyer, a grand entryway with marble floors and a crystal chandelier that cost more than my college tuition. To my left was a mahogany table set up for the guest book, where people were supposed to write their congratulations and leave cards. The table was piled high with envelopes containing checks, money my parents would likely try to intercept later. I opened the guest book. It was filled with generic platitudes. "Great party. So proud of you. Lovely evening." I took a pen from the holder, on a fresh page, in clear, block letters. I wrote, "Thank you for the graduation gift." I read it carefully. I closed the book, I placed the manila envelope on top of it, right in the center, where no one could miss it. Then I looked up. Standing near the coat check, holding a tray of empty glasses, was Kevin. He was watching me. He hadn't gone back into the ballroom. He looked tired, his bow tie slightly askew, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and respect. He had seen me dismantle my father's reputation inside, and now he was watching me leave the wreckage. I walked over to him. "You okay?" I asked. My voice was calm, almost conversational. "I have seen some bad toasts in my life," Kevin said, shaking his head slightly. "But that was something else. It had to be done," I said. I opened my clutch. I didn't have a roll of hundreds. I didn't have a money clip made of alligator skin. I reached into my wallet and pulled out 2 $20 bills and a $10, $50. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't a show. It was roughly 20% of a decent night's pay. Perhaps a little more. It was a standard, respectful tip. I held it out to him. Kevin hesitated. "You don't have to do that. You just, quit the family." "Take it," I said. "This isn't hush money, and it isn't an ego trip." He looked at the cash, then at my face. He took it. "Thanks, Nora," he said. "Tonight, you will probably be asked to sign an NDA by my father's lawyers before you leave." I told him, "Read it before you sign it, and charge them double for the overtime." "I will," he said. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Good luck." "I don't need luck anymore," I said. "I have the receipts." I turned around and walked out the door for the last time. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of the party shifting. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by the buzzing sound of gossip. My mother was calling my phone again. I could feel the vibration in my bag. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I didn't decline the call. I didn't block the number. I just let it ring. Let her listen to the void. I got into my Honda. The engine started with its usual rattle, a sound that used to embarrass me but now sounded like freedom. I backed out of the spot, my headlights sweeping across the rows of luxury cars, the Mercedes, the BMWs, the status symbols that trapped their owners in a cycle of debt and appearance. As I drove down the long, winding driveway, I passed a group of smokers standing near the gate. They stopped talking as I passed. They stared at me through the windshield. They weren't looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at me with fear. They looked at me like I was a shark who had just learned how to swim. I turned onto the main road. The streetlights of Savannah flickered past, rhythmic and steady. My phone screen lit up again. This time it wasn't a call. It was a text from Logan. "Nora, what the hell was that? You just cost us the Sterling account. Come back and fix this." I glanced at the message and smiled. Fix it? I had just fixed it. I had spent 22 years being the glue that held their fragile egos together. I had been the silent witness, the obedient prop, the lucky daughter. Tonight, I had resigned from the job of being their collateral. I reached over and turned on the radio. A classic rock station was playing. I turned the volume up, drowning out the phantom sound of my father's voice, drowning out the memory of the applause, drowning out the lie. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there I needed. My future wasn't in that house. It was in the hard drive sitting on my passenger seat, and in the mind that had finally decided to work for itself. The morning sun that filtered through the blinds of my apartment did not feel like a new day. It felt like the opening bell of a boxing match where only one fighter realized the bout had started. I sat at my small kitchen table, a mug of black coffee steaming in front of me, watching my phone screen light up with the rhythmic precision of a metronome. Mom calling, Dad calling, Mom calling, unknown number calling. I did not answer. I simply watched the names appear and vanish, imagining the chaos unfolding across town in the pristine, panic-filled halls of the Whitman estate. At 8:15 in the morning, my laptop chimed with an incoming video call from Elliot Haynes. I answered immediately. Elliot looked remarkably fresh for a man who had likely been awake since dawn. He was sitting in his office, a wall of legal books behind him, looking like the cat who had not only eaten the canary, but had also filed a motion to dismiss the canary's complaint. "Good morning, Nora," Elliot said, his voice raspy but amused. "Your father called me at 7 o'clock. He bypassed his own legal counsel to scream at me personally. It was quite a performance." "What did he say?" I asked, taking a sip of coffee. "He threatened to sue me for malpractice, interference with a contract, and my personal favorite, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, which I assume refers to the stress I'm causing him." Elliot chuckled dryly. "He demanded I retract the preservation lien immediately and release the funds in the trust." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him that I am not your lawyer in that transaction. I am merely the custodian of the paperwork he signed," Elliot said, leaning back in his chair. I reminded him that he executed the kickstart package in front of 2 witnesses, his wife and his broker, and that the matching clause he wrote is legally binding. I told him, "Mr. Whitman, you drafted the contract, you created the trust, you signed the liability waiver. If the bank has frozen the assets due to a compliance flag, that is a matter between you and your lender. Nora has simply followed the rules you wrote." "Did he scream?" "He did," Elliot said. "He screamed that you were ungrateful. He screamed that this was a misunderstanding. Then he tried to offer me a settlement to make you go away. I told him that since there is a fraud investigation pending regarding the signature on the deed, any settlement offer could be construed as witness tampering." He hung up. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. "So the bank froze it?" "Tighter than a drum," Elliot confirmed. "The $25,000 you wired is locked in, and because of the matching clause, the bank is now demanding he deposit his matching share of $25,000 immediately to stay compliant with the trust terms, even though he cannot access the account. He is in a liquidity squeeze. Nora, and word travels fast." Word did indeed travel fast. By 9:30, the second domino fell. I received a notification from a Google alert I had set up for Whitman and Savannah Heritage Growth Fund. It was a short blurb in a local business newsletter, but the headline was devastating. "Heritage Fund delays capital deployment pending due diligence review." It didn't name my father. It didn't have to. Everyone in the inner circle knew the Whitmans were the frontrunners for that capital. The delay was polite corporate speak for, "We heard there is a mess, and we are not touching it." My father needed that fund to cover the loans he had taken out against the firm's future earnings. Without it, the house of cards began to shake. At 10 o'clock, the rats began to flee the ship. My phone buzzed with a text message. It wasn't my parents this time. Sender: Logan Pierce. Time: 10:12 a.m. Nora. "We need to talk. Alone. Your dad is losing it. But I think we can fix this. I didn't know about the signature on the deed. I swear. I was just the broker. Don't drag my license into this. Call me." I stared at the message. Logan, the man who had smirked at me while conspiring to bulldoze my grandmother's house, was now begging. He realized that if this went to court, my father would throw him under the bus to save himself. Logan was the registered agent. Logan was the one who filed the paperwork. If the deed was forged, Logan was an accessory to real estate fraud. I didn't reply. I didn't want his apologies. And I certainly didn't trust his sudden claim of innocence. He knew. He had always known. By noon, the parental strategy shifted from panic to rage. The voicemails started piling up, transcribed by my phone's AI. Voice message from Mom. "Nora, pick up the phone right now. You are embarrassing us. People are asking questions. Do you have any idea how much we have sacrificed for you? You are acting like a spoiled child. Fix this lien today or don't bother coming home." Voice message from Dad. "You listen to me. I made you. I can unmake you. You think you are smart? You are a girl with a laptop. You have no idea how the real world works. If that money isn't released by tomorrow, I am cutting you off. Health insurance, car insurance, everything. You are dead to us." They were flailing. They were threatening to cut off support I hadn't received in years. I paid for my own car insurance. I bought my own health plan through the university. They were so disconnected from my actual life that they didn't even know what leverage they didn't have. I decided it was time to speak, not to argue, but to close the door. I opened my email client. I composed a single message addressed to Graham Whitman, Celeste Whitman, and copied to Logan Pierce and Elliot Haynes. Subject: Notice of representation regarding Davenport Trust. To Graham and Celeste. Per the terms of the Asset Management Agreement signed yesterday, specifically Clause 14B and the Conflict of Interest provisions, I am exercising my right to halt all activity on the Davenport House title due to the pending investigation regarding the authenticity of the 2021 Deed of Assent. Furthermore, please be advised that I'm aware of the irregularities in my scholarship applications from 2 years ago. We are currently compiling the metadata. Do not contact me directly again. All future communication regarding my assets, my signature, or my legal standing must be directed to my attorney, Mr. Haynes. Regards, Nora Whitman. I attach the high-resolution comparison of the forged signature. I hit send. It was the digital equivalent of dropping the mic and walking off stage. I wasn't asking for an apology. I was stating a fact. I am no longer your victim. I am the plaintiff. An hour later, Mara Quinn called. "You are brutal," she said, her voice filled with professional admiration. "I just saw the email. You didn't even use an exclamation point." "Facts don't need exclamation points," I said. "What did you find on the asset trace?" "The audit is going to be ugly, Nora," Mara said, her tone turning serious. "The bank flagged the Whitman Family Management LLC not just for the loan issues, but for commingling of funds. It looks like your father has been moving client retainer fees, money that belongs to his legal clients, into the family operating account to pay for lifestyle expenses, the boat, the cars, the parties." I closed my eyes. He is borrowing from client escrow accounts? "It looks like it," Mara said. "In the legal world, that is the cardinal sin. If the Bar Association catches wind of that, he doesn't just lose the election. He loses his license. He goes to prison. The audit triggered by the frozen trust will expose that." I realized. "Yes," Mara said. "By forcing the bank to look at the trust, you force them to look at the LLC that funds it. You pulled a thread on a sweater, and the whole suit is unraveling. He is sitting on a time bomb, and the timer is set to the speed of a forensic accountant." My parents must have sensed the walls closing in, because my mother played her final card. Public sympathy. Around 3 o'clock, my phone started buzzing with notifications from Facebook and Instagram. Friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years, were tagging me. I opened Instagram. My mother had posted a photo of me from high school, a picture where I looked young, vulnerable, and dependent. The caption read, "Heartbroken today. It is so hard when our children are led astray by bad influences and toxic advice. We love Nora so much, and we are praying she finds her way back to the family who has always supported her. Mental health is a silent battle. Please respect our privacy while we help our daughter through this crisis. Family first pray for Nora." She was spinning it. She was painting me as mentally unstable, manipulated by outsiders, likely implying Elliot or some imaginary boyfriend, and herself as the grieving, supportive mother. She was trying to discredit me before the truth came out. If I spoke up now, I would look like the crazy daughter lashing out. I hovered my thumb over the comment section. I wanted to type, "I am not crazy. I am a forensic analyst, and you forged my signature." But I stopped. "Never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake," I whispered to myself. If I argued, I engaged in their drama. If I stayed silent, the contrast between her hysterical posting and my professional silence would speak volumes. Besides, the privacy she asked for was about to be shattered by a bank audit, not by me. I put the phone down. Let them have the likes. I had the law. Then, at 5:45, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My phone chimed with a text from a number I didn't save, but I recognized the area code. Sender. Unknown time. 5:45 p.m. "Hi, Nora. This is Kevin, the bartender from last night. I hope this isn't weird." I stared at the screen. "Kevin? The guy I had tipped $50. Nora. Hi, Kevin. It is not weird. Is everything okay? Did they fire you? Kevin. No. They tried to make me sign an NDA like you said. But I told them I needed my lawyer to look at it first. They didn't like that. But that is not why I'm texting. Kevin. I was cleaning up the bar area near the patio right before everyone arrived last night. Your dad and that guy Logan were arguing. They didn't see me. Nora. What did they say? Kevin. Your dad asked if the fix on the deed would hold up if the bank checked. Logan said, as long as she doesn't see the original from 2021, we are good. The digital copy is seamless, your dad said. She won't see it. I burned the hard copy in the fireplace 2 years ago. I stopped breathing for a second. Intent. This wasn't just proof of the forgery. It was proof of destruction of evidence. It was proof that my father had physically burned the original deed to hide his crime. And Kevin, a neutral third party with no stake in the family fortune, had heard it. Nora. Kevin, would you be willing to swear to that in an affidavit? Kevin. I already wrote it down. My mom got screwed over by a lawyer like your dad once. I don't like bullies. Just tell me where to send it. I lowered the phone. A tear. Hot and singular. Tracked down my cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was relief. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to fight them on social media. I didn't need to play their games of emotional manipulation. I had the data, I had the law, and now I had the witness. They thought they were fighting a confused little girl who just wanted attention. They didn't realize they were fighting a case that was already closed. I forwarded the screenshot of Kevin's text to Elliot and Mara with a simple caption, checkmate. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across my apartment. For the first time in my life, the darkness didn't feel like a place to hide. It felt like the curtain coming down on a very long, very bad play. Tomorrow, they would try one last time to pull me back in. They would try to use the graduation dinner sentimentality to trap me, but they didn't know that the Nora who sat at that table was already gone. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights of Savannah were flickering on. Somewhere out there, my father was probably pouring another scotch, trying to figure out how to spin his way out of a mathematical impossibility. He didn't know yet that the math always wins. The gray was exactly as loud and crowded as it had been on the night of my graduation, but this time, the noise felt distant, like static on a radio channel I was no longer tuned into. My parents had insisted on meeting here. It was a power move, of course. They thought that by bringing me back to the scene of the crime, the place where they felt like royalty and I felt like a servant, they could reset the dynamic. They thought the familiar setting would trigger my old muscle memory of submission. I walked to the table. They were already seated. My father, Graham, looked 10 years older than he had 3 days ago. His face was gray, the lines around his mouth etched deep with stress. My mother, Celeste, was wearing sunglasses indoors, likely to hide eyes swollen from rage or panic. There was a fourth chair, empty, waiting for me. I sat down. I did not apologize for being late. I did not smile. I placed my clutch on the table next to the bread basket. You came, my father said. His voice was rough, lacking its usual courtroom boom. You said it was urgent, I replied calmly. And you said if I didn't come, you would file a police report claiming I stole the car. We were emotional, my mother said quickly, taking off her sunglasses to reveal eyes that were indeed red-rimmed. We just want to fix this. Nora, families fight, but families fix things. My father pushed a thin folder across the white tablecloth. It wasn't the thick Kickstart package from the other day. It was a single document, stapled twice. This is a correction of error affidavit, my father said, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. It states that the filing of the historical preservation lien was a clerical mistake on your part. It also clarifies that the transfer of the Davenport deed was done with your full verbal consent 2 years ago, retroactive to the date of signing. I looked at the paper. It was a confession. If I signed this, I was admitting to incompetence and validating their fraud. I would be clearing the title for them so they could satisfy the bank, get the Heritage Fund money, and continue living their lie. "And if I sign this?" I asked. "Then we drop the threats," my father said. "We unfreeze the trust so you get your $25,000 back, and we go back to normal. We will even forget the little stunt you pulled at the party." "Forget," I repeated. "Is that what you call it?" "Nora, please," my mother hissed, looking around to see if anyone was watching. "Mr. Sterling is asking questions. The bank is holding the line of credit. If we don't clear this title by Monday morning, the deal collapses. Do you understand? We could lose the firm. We could lose the house." "I understand perfectly," I said. "I am an analyst, remember? I ran the numbers." I picked up the folder. I felt the weight of it. For a moment, I remembered the little girl who just wanted her dad to look at her homework. I remembered the teenager who wore old shoes so her mother could buy new curtains. I dropped the folder back onto the table. It landed with a dull slap. "No," I said. My father's face darkened. The benevolence vanished, replaced by the ugly, snarling entitlement I had seen in the garage. "You listen to me," he growled, leaning in so close I could smell the scotch on his breath. "We are your family. We put clothes on your back. We gave you a name that opens doors in this city. You do not get to destroy us just because you are having a tantrum. Sign the paper. Don't make me lose face in this town." I looked him dead in the eye. My heart rate didn't even spike. "You talk about investment," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You talk about what you gave me. But let's look at the ledger. Dad." I pointed to the spot where the waiter had stood 3 nights ago. "On Tuesday, right here, you pulled out a money clip and handed a stranger $500. I said, "You did it without blinking. You did it to show your friends that you were a big man. $500 for a 2-hour dinner service." My father flinched. "When I was 19, I continued, "I needed $300 for a root canal. You told me to put ice on it because cash was tight. When I needed a laptop for my degree, you told me to use the library. You have tipped strangers more in one night than you invested in my health and education in a decade." "That is not true," my mother protested weakly. "We gave you—" "You gave me scraps." I cut her off. "And now, when the bill comes due for your own greed, you want me to sign my name to save your reputation? You want me to take on the debt so you can keep the credit?" I reached into my bag. I pulled out my own folder. It was black, slim, deadly. I placed it on top of their correction affidavit. "This is not a negotiation," I said. "Inside this folder is a copy of the waiver of liability I signed on Tuesday, Clause 14B. It proves I have no legal obligation to help you. Next to it is a notarized affidavit from a forensic handwriting expert confirming that the signature on the Davenport deed from 2 years ago is a digital forgery." My father stopped breathing. His face went the color of ash. "And," I added, "there is a USB drive. It contains the audio recording from the garage on Tuesday night, the part where you called me a resume patter, and the part where Logan admitted to knowing the deed was fake." My mother put a hand to her mouth. "You recorded us?" "I documented the data," I corrected. "If you try to sue me, if you try to harass me, or if you refuse to return my $25,000 immediately, this folder goes to the district attorney and the State Bar Association, today." My father slumped back in his chair. He looked small. The suit that usually looked like armor now looked like a costume that didn't fit. He realized the trap. If he fought me, the investigation would reveal the client fund embezzlement. If he surrendered, he lost the Heritage Fund and the house, but he might stay out of prison. "You would send your own father to jail?" he whispered. "No," I said. "You sent yourself to jail when you forged my name. I am just offering you a plea deal. Leave me alone. Return my money, and I keep the file closed. Push me, and I open it." "Nora!" The voice came from the entryway. Logan Pierce was rushing toward our table, looking frantic. His tie was loose, his hair messy. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in 48 hours. "Thank God you are here," Logan panted. Stopping at the table, he ignored my parents and looked straight at me. "Nora, look, I can explain. The text about the demolition. It was just talk. We can renegotiate. I can get you a cut of the development fee. Just tell the bank to back off. I looked at Logan. I remembered how he used to hold my hand and tell me I was special, all while planning how to liquidate my inheritance. Logan, I said coolly, you are not a boyfriend. You are not a broker. You are just a man who counts percentages on other people's lives. And your percentage of my life just dropped to 0. You don't understand, Logan pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. If this deal dies, my firm fires me. I lose my license. That sounds like a risk analysis failure, I said. You should have checked the variables. My father opened his mouth to speak, to try one last manipulation, but he was interrupted. A shadow fell over the table. We all looked up. It was Kevin, the waiter. He wasn't our server tonight. He was working a section across the room, but he had walked over. Holding a black leather bill folder, he placed it gently on the table in front of my father. We didn't ask for the check yet, my father snapped, trying to regain a shred of authority. I know, Kevin said. His voice was calm, respectful, but firm. But my manager thought it would be best if you settled up now. My father glared at him. Do you know who I am? Yes, Kevin said. I remember you from Tuesday. You are the gentleman who wanted everyone to see how much money he had. My mother gasped. Logan looked away. I also remember what you said, Kevin continued, looking directly at my father. When your daughter left the table, you said she was an asset. You said she would never read the papers. You laughed about it. The silence at the table was heavy, suffocating. My father couldn't speak. He had been stripped naked in front of the very audience he performed for. The witness had spoken. I am ready to take your payment whenever you are ready, sir, Kevin said, and stepped back. I stood up. My legs felt strong. The air in the restaurant suddenly felt breathable again. I looked at the check. I did not reach for my father's wallet. I reached into my own purse. I pulled out a $20 bill and a $10 bill. $30. Enough to cover my glass of wine and the bread I hadn't eaten. I placed the cash on the table. That is my share, I said. Then, I pulled out another $50, 2 20s and a 10. I handed them directly to Kevin. And this, I said, loud enough for my parents to hear, is for you. It is not $500. It is just a fair tip, because you did your job and you told the truth. That is worth more than their charity. Kevin took the money. He nodded at me. Thank you, Nora. I turned back to my parents one last time. They sat amidst the ruins of their scheme, the unsigned affidavit, the damning evidence folder, and the humiliation of being called out by the help. I am leaving now, I said. Do not follow me. Do not call me. Use the money in the trust to pay your lawyers. You are going to need them. Nora, my mother whispered, tears finally spilling over. Real tears this time. Tears of loss. What are we supposed to do? I don't know, I said. Maybe you should try working for a living. I turned my back on them. I walked past Logan, who was staring at the floor. I walked past the tables of Savannah's elite, who were too polite to stare but were definitely listening. I pushed open the doors of the gray and stepped out into the night. The air was humid and sweet, smelling of jasmine and rain. I walked to my beat-up Honda Civic. I got in. I threw the clutch onto the passenger seat. I started the engine. It rattled, a comfortable, familiar sound. I didn't drive back to my tiny apartment. I drove toward the highway. I had $25,000 coming back to me once the lawyers finished dissecting the trust. I had a job offer in Chicago that Mara had helped me secure that morning. I had a name that was finally, truly mine. My parents had wanted a return on their investment. They got one. They invested in deception, and they reaped exposure. I merged onto the interstate, the city of Savannah fading in my rearview mirror. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate takes energy. I just felt a profound, quiet lightness. They had tried to make me pay for their lives. Instead, I had made them pay the bill. And as the city lights disappeared behind me, I knew one thing for sure. I would never sit at a table where I was on the menu again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed Nora's journey from a silent prop to a woman who took back her power. I am curious to know, where are you tuning in from right now? Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to see where our community is listening from. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next story.